Welcome back, crew members. This is the Abingdon Company, and we go on adventures with adventurous women in non-traditional industries. Today is something that's kind of unique because I'm actually going to be reading from a book that has a collection of stories of women that are non-traditional. It's called Women's Work. And this is a book by a guy named Chris Crisman. He is a photographer, and 56 stories are in here about 56 different women and their paths to how they became what they are in life. I'm actually one of the women in this book, and I'm not being paid to promote it or anything like that, but once the book was finished, I, of course, went and got a copy of it and started reading it. And I read it every morning, and it just pumps me up. It kind of sets my day right and inspires me to go out and conquer life. And it's just really neat. I find it's very important to hear other people's stories, whether you are watching them on YouTube or you're going to a conference or an event and you hear somebody speak. Or you read their biography or their short story. And in this case, these are just a bunch of short stories. So I'm going to be sharing them with you, and I will have a link down below. So if you want to get your own copy of the book, by all means, it's right there. You can read along with me. Today, I'm going to read about Julie Engiles. She's a veterinarian pathologist and professor. This is kind of relevant to what's going on right now with COVID and some of the work that she does in discovering viruses and things. You'll hear about this, but considering we're navigating such a new territory right now as a society with how to just behave with each other, with the food that we eat, with the food that we process, and what could potentially happen, I thought that this would be a really good story to introduce this part of the series to. So, without further ado, here is Julie's story. It has been fun participating in this project because as a veterinarian pathologist and instructor, I'm never on the other side of the camera. I'm always the one documenting and demonstrating. I'm never the one being documented. As an academic veterinarian pathologist, that's what we do. Provide a clinical service that documents and bears witness to disease, as well as teach and advance the field through research. Oftentimes, we're doing everything simultaneously, performing a post-mortem exam while instructing and managing the various people on the floor, making sure that the specimens go where they're supposed to, and paramount, ensuring that we answer the questions posed by our clients, whether they are hospital clinicians, referring veterinarians, law enforcement, animal producers, or individual owners. As a diagnostic pathologist, my job is to identify disease through the examination of animal tissues. These tissues can be submitted as smaller samples excised from a live animal, which is called a biopsy, or submitted as an entire dead animal, which is called an autopsy. Although our patients may no longer be alive, our business is still high stakes. Our mission is to ensure diseases are not missed and that we are able to safeguard against something that might not be visible with our naked eyes because it's microscopic, toxic, or metabolic. Each animal receives a thorough and systematic exam performed in 2 stages. The first stage, known as the gross or macroscopic exam, involves the initial dissection and evaluation using as many senses as we can: sight, touch, sound, and sometimes hearing. In my business, the sense of taste is not recommended. That's supposed to be a joke. The movement, dissection, and processing of large deceased bodies such as cows and horses is inherently hazardous, requiring the use of dangerous equipment. Thus, each autopsy performed safely and expediently represents a large team effort, including a highly trained technical staff working in conjunction with the pathologist. Add students or interested clinicians to the process, and you've got a very carefully choreographed, albeit bizarre, ballet, some of which is exhibited in the photographs. The second stage, the microscopic portion of the exam, is performed on ultra-thin, stained sections of tissues mounted on glass slides. These sections are processed from the various tissues harvested during the gross portion of the exam and thus provide a literal close-up view of the disease that can either confirm or refute our diagnostic suspicions from the initial dissection. The production of these slides is an art as well as a science, requiring very specialized skill sets and careful efforts by my technical staff. This stage of the exam may also include other CSI-like diagnostic tests that may be used to identify infectious or toxic agents. We use our training and experience, much of which is based on color and pattern recognition, to identify abnormal changes, called lesions, within the tissues. We ask ourselves critical questions and proceed with diagnostics that provide answers that satisfy the questions posed by ourselves and our clients. For example, given an animal's medical history and its particular manifestation of symptoms, the gross or microscopic evidence that lies before us often represent a succinct list of plausible diagnoses, many of which are common natural diseases. However, we routinely collect a number of samples, so if our initial hedge is wrong and the cause turns out to be some weird flying zebra, then we have the samples to research and pursue it further. Hollywood interpretations of CSI greatly oversimplify the forensic process, making a pathologist's job seem incredibly simple and straightforward. In reality, the process is complex, time-consuming, and labor-intensive, requiring the reconciliation of antemortem information reported from owners, producers, veterinarians, or government agencies with the evidence provided at autopsy, which may also include a number of microbiology or toxicology results. Depending on the test selected, the final report that synthesizes all of these antemortem and postmortem data may take days to weeks to complete, requiring the input from numerous personnel representing multiple disciplines. Depending on the disease process itself, e.g., acute seizure or cardiac arrhythmias, the changes in tissues may be very subtle or inapparent, or sometimes the tissue changes are obscured by postmortem decomposition. Either scenario may leave the pathologist without a definitive cause of death, which is just as frustrating for the pathologist as it may be for the client. However, although we pathologists may not have all the answers, in most cases we are able to provide critical information that can help prevent disease, treat disease, or rule out a disease that might have devastating consequences to animal or human populations. People frequently ask why I'd want such a disgusting job dealing with so much death. Pathology is definitely a dirty job that is not very glamorous and often very humbling. But to me, being the person whose job it is to definitively identify diseases suspected in the antemortem, or before death, diagnosis, further investigate and understand disease, or even discover new diseases, is more fulfilling than being the person who directly treats diseases in the living animal. This job provides the opportunity to understand how organisms operate on the smallest level of the cell to the larger level of the global environment. You can see histories within the cells and tissues of these animals that maybe nobody knew prior to your identification. I find experiencing these different perspectives very zen. You can step back from your microscope and see the forest for the trees, but also allow yourself to really focus on a single pine. There are a beauty, a mystery, and an intrigue in all aspects of it. You never stop learning. You're often in awe of what you discover and what that animal allows you to discover. It's a gift the animals give us, in that way through their death. In addition to discovery, I also enjoy documenting the stories that underlie animal disease. As pathologists and scientists, these stories comprise compilations of carefully documented results from gross, microscopic, and ancillary tests. Using a combination of technical scientific language and digital photography, we logically organize, interpret, and categorize our findings in a way that hopefully accurately, conveys the recent events and disease processes leading to the animal's demise. Sometimes the images taken in the post room and at the microscope to photo document disease are quite beautiful and artistic in their own light. More important, the stories pathologists craft are often providing answers to important questions. These answers can provide emotional comfort to an owner on their animal's quality of life, with the answer that they did the right thing, or that no amount of money in the world could have healed this animal or made it feel any better. The answers we provide can also have broader practical ramifications. If you're dealing with a disease outbreak in a herd, a farmer needs you to figure out what's going on, not only for the sake of ensuring a safe food or on-farm efficiency, but also for the health and well-being of the animals. In conjunction with other veterinarians, pathologists can advise on cleanliness and hygiene called biosecurity, as well as preventative measures such as vaccination, nutritional, or environmental management. We can often determine between a problem that may be a red herring or a problem that really seems to be recurrent or systemic and provide answers to properly treat and hopefully prevent that disease in the future. In addition, as veterinarians, we're linked to global human and animal health systems, and often network together through municipal, state, and federal government agencies. For people who don't like big government, I can empathize, but it does have some benefits, disease surveillance being one of the critical importance. When funding is cut in the areas of health professions and science, it has a profound effect on local, regional, and global health. You might think, USDA, that's for the cows. I don't have cows. Why should I care about the USDA? Well, the USDA looks for diseases that not only affect the cow's health, but also diseases that could also infect humans or diseases that impact the agricultural industry and trade, any of which could impact food safety or security, which has a direct impact on the economy and our overall well-being. For example, in 2001, the UK experienced an outbreak of foot and mouth disease, FMD, that ultimately cost the nation more than $1 billion and decimated their rural economy. While FMD is generally not outright fatal for animals, the pain associated with the lesions it causes reduces their willingness to eat and ambulate. In cattle, this can dramatically reduce milk production and growth rates. The highly contagious nature of the virus makes it very difficult to control and eradicate, requiring extensive quarantine measures with imposed restrictions on export markets and slaughter of infected animals to prevent further spread of the disease. Another example where the USDA plays a critical role involves zoonotic diseases, meaning diseases that can be passed from animals to humans, which are now estimated to be more than 60% of all infectious diseases and 75% of emerging infectious diseases infecting people. The USDA also helps veterinarians and pathologists diagnose food or vector, e.g. mosquito, borne illnesses in animals to prevent disease in humans. Although veterinarians have always practiced medicine in the context of One Health, this concept is now embraced by agencies such as the CDC and international human health networks. I think One Health really speaks to the interconnectedness of the planet, from human and animal populations to local and global environments to local and global economies. I love that my job enables me to give people a broader understanding about how we're all linked together. It goes beyond just self-fulfillment. As a veterinarian pathologist, there's an aspect of service to it where you can really make a difference in people's as well as animals' lives. In addition, this job has really helped me appreciate and reimagine the food I eat. I totally understand why people are vegetarians or vegans, but gosh, it's become such a gray area for me. Although I used to be a vegetarian, now converted to an omnivore, I think of eating animals in the framework of the larger global ecosystem. I like the idea of supporting local sustainable agriculture, which ideally should include good antimicrobial stewardship balanced with the promotion of animal health and welfare. However, these balances can be tricky, especially considering that in Pennsylvania, Agriculture remains the largest industry in the state, representing livelihoods that go way beyond hobby farming. The principles and goals of sustainable agriculture are admirable and necessary for the future, but in practice, they involved very complex processes. Therefore, it's imperative that policies be created taking into account all stakeholders: producers, consumers, the animals, and the environment. My story as to why and how I became a veterinarian pathologist is a bit long and convoluted. When I was a kid, I loved animals. I loved them to death. Well, not literally. I wanted to be a farmer, an actual farmer, and people told me, you should be a veterinarian. I remember saying, no, I don't like sick animals. I couldn't stand the sight of blood, and I abhorred suffering. I was petrified of injury, hurt, and disease. As a 4 to 8-year-old kid, I said I would never become a veterinarian. Not to mention, as a middle schooler, I was really bad at math and science. I started thinking about law until I had a really good math teacher and a really good high school friend who were both extremely patient and believed in me. The friends sat me down and taught me the beauty of mathematics and science. They showed me that math is a language just like French or English. That was a paradigm shift and was the beginning of my winding path down the road of my scientific career training and eventual career in medicine. I began a major in astrophysics in college. I certainly liked and was more comfortable with math by then, but I thought I wasn't as proficient as I felt the field required. I was the only female in my honors physics class, and I felt inadequate, like physics wasn't my natural talent. However, when I took a biology class as part of the science major, I fell in love with it and began the discovery of my natural interests and talents. With the patient mentorship of another wonderful professor, I developed a personalized biophysics major at my university. From there, I wormed my way into a medical scholars program that was for pre-med students soon to be matriculated into a local medical school. It was in a problem-based learning course in physiology where I fell in love with science. Because an injury during my senior year prevented me from having the time to study for the med school entrance exams while completing my courses and volunteering in a laboratory, I ended up in an entry-level job at a cancer research center responsible for one laboratory's mouse colonies. One strain of mice started dying at an early age, which wasn't expected as part of our experimentation. I started performing my own postmortems on these mice, and then actually doing my own histology to look at their organs under the microscope. This was my introduction to pathology. There was a comparative biology aspect that I fell in love with, and that's when the light bulb went off, and I realized there were these people who practiced medicine on animals called veterinarians. That's how I ended up at Penn Vet for my VMD. Another example of my winding path is that after veterinary school, I thought I wanted to be an equine orthopedic surgeon. However, in my surgery internship, I realized that I was more interested in the why disease happens than the how we treat disease. After considering residencies in anesthesia or equine ambulatory medicine, I happily ended up in my anatomic pathology residency back at Penn, and ultimately in my current faculty position as a veterinarian pathologist. Happily ever after. My winding path helped me realize that it's okay if you are not the type of person who fits into the mold or is a long-term goal setter. It's okay to take the time to figure out the path that best suits your soul. I think when it comes down to a career, you need to find something that reflects who you are deep inside, the core of you, something that makes you feel like when you were a kid, those times you were completely carefree and chasing sensations full of joy. It may never feel exactly like that, but listening to and respecting that inner voice and finding the things that find you joy can nudge you toward a career that provides long-lasting satisfaction. Don't be afraid to change your direction if you realize something isn't the right fit for you, no matter what you've invested beforehand or what others' expectations are for you. Don't be afraid to show vulnerability with others, and do use others for help and guidance. If they're good people, you'll want those good people helping you, and sometimes carrying or dragging you along your path. There will always be obstacles, but if you follow your inner nudges, you should be all right. It seems hard for kids these days. There are so many expectations. There are so many people saying, if you want to do this, you better be studying Mozart at age 4, and you better be in all these extracurricular activities because these colleges want to see well-rounded students. You're trying to be this ideal superstar, and you're spread so thin. It seems kids today don't have time to be kids. I see it in vet students who are so in their heads about what people think and what grades they think they need, equating the letter grade of B with failure as a student and a failure as a human being. It seems that they haven't been allowed to fail in small ways throughout their lives. As young adults, they won't allow themselves to fail even just a bit, because they're driven by a strong, fear-driven need to achieve. As a teacher, it is almost devastating to see, for failure is an integral part of learning, especially in science. Who is perfect? No one. Some students want to give up at the slightest bit of inadequacy. Perhaps I did the same thing, faced with my insecurities with college physics. But since then, through experiencing my own failures, I've learned you have to shake it off, laugh it off, and know deep down that you're a decent human being. You're doing the best you can, and although sometimes you're going to screw up and feel inadequate, most of the time you're not, and you're doing just fine. The field of medicine can be very gray and nuanced. A lot of problems or questions have more than one answer, which may or may not be black or white. As a clinician and scientist, you have to learn to be comfortable with that gray, and if you're not, keep searching until you find an answer. It may not be the most absolutely correct answer, but if it's in the ballpark, it's at least a start and not necessarily wrong. It's why we perform research and why there is a "re" in research, meaning we really do learn from mistakes. As a scientist, you have to be able to put yourself into a situation where you can make little mistakes and be okay with it. Generally, if you're being careful, you won't make an enormous mistake. As medical professionals, we need to prevent or avoid mistakes that result in more harm to our patients. But the field will not advance without asking hard questions and making calculated risks to explore the unknown. I don't think students are often taught that, especially when internet answers are so readily available at their fingertips. When curriculums solely focus on standardized testing, education becomes confining. You're selecting for good hoop jumpers. Although the profession may need some good hoop jumpers, the profession also needs critical thinkers. Students who can take the hoop, pop it over their head, and go through it in a way that shifts the paradigm or provides a novel perspective. I don't know what's next for me. I've demonstrated through my personal winding path how I'm not a great long-term planner. I've always found my path through life by taking a step forward and sticking my toe out and going, that ground feels secure, I'll walk onto that. Or, oh, that feels like it's crumbling, let's go this direction instead. I've always seemed to feel my way across this planet, and thankfully, wonderful opportunities seem to present themselves in ways I wouldn't expect. However, I have absolutely no expectation for what's to come, and for some reason, I find that comforting. How cool is that? I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I learned a ton from her and really found that it doesn't really matter if you don't have to have a path set out for you all the time. For me, I stumbled into watchmaking because I love to fly, and yet I found that the two industries, flying an airplane and making a watch, are actually very similar. It's just one's a very large machine and the other one is a very tiny machine. But they both are mechanical, they both work. You have to treat them with care and discipline. And if you do, then you'll master both of them. So I really liked how her story was so varied and she kind of jumped all over the place because I feel like that's kind of how I did with my story. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this story. I look forward to sharing more of the stories out of this book. It's called Women's Work, and like I said, there will be a link in the description below that will link you to her, to the book, to some of the other things that were mentioned, and I will join you again on another story. Thanks so much.